definitely use like 1/8" toggles or whatever. Or, you know, put a stud on the back side. If you lay this flat on the ceiling tile and drill your holes through, you can put the toggle bolts through here, and now you're using the surface area to hold the camera rather than just the soft fiber from the ceiling tile. Different types of screws. Believe it or not, it comes in handy to have all of these, and they all serve a different purpose. Everything from self-drilling screws. If you look at those, they have a drill bit built into the end of it. They'll go through metal and whatever. They come with bigger heads, smaller heads, whatever. Wood screws, they have a sharp point. They'll go through sheetrock and wood, and even the aluminum stud. These black ones do. These guys here, I keep them, don't ever use them. They're concrete screws, they suck. They're meant for concrete and brick. You have to drill a pilot hole, and you're relying on just these threads. A lot of the times they don't sit right, and if you're drilling through soft concrete or brick, some guys put them in the mortar because it's easier to drill through the mortar. It's the first thing that breaks down. So as you're tightening it, everybody, especially me, has the habit of over-tightening stuff, and you'll just strip the concrete right out of it, and you're basically just hoping, you're relying or taking a bet that the screw is going to stay in that hole and not slide out, because that's what will happen. So I keep some on me just in case, but you know, don't ever use them. Lag bolts, pointy tip. If you're going to use lag bolts, they're good for wood studs. Drill a pilot hole. If you don't drill a pilot hole, you're going to split the wood behind, and you won't even see it because it's behind the sheetrock. So the best way to do it is, if you hold the drill bit up to the lag bolt, the drill bit should be the size of the shaft, not the threads. So if you look at that, you'll be able to see the threads on both the top and bottom side of the lag bolt. That's about the size pilot bit you want to use. If you go too small, you're still going to split the wood. If you go too big, then the threads aren't going to eat into the wood, and again, you're relying on the chance that it may not come out. So anytime you're using lag bolts, drill a pilot hole. It'll still hold. And that's about that. There are some other types of screws and stuff like that. Most of them we don't use, other than this stuff is basically what I use. These guys here, they're still the same self-drilling screws. They just have a hex head on it if you need more torque and your screwdriver keeps slipping. But these heads are big, so you know, they kind of get in the way of stuff. The last thing I want to go over is rigging. The drilling stuff is easy. With rigging, the main thing is finding something that's secure enough to hold whatever it is that you're hanging. I mean, any of the metal studs in the walls or wood studs in the walls for the TVs, that's fine. Just use lag bolts or toggle bolts, whichever one you have, for the wood or metal. But the speaker arrays and stuff like that, you know, sometimes we have to hang them from the ceilings or even from the walls. You know, if you're hanging the community speakers from the wall and we have that L bracket or C bracket that's provided with it, just use the lag bolts and the wood studs or the toggle bolts and the metal studs. But when we have to lift them from overhead, you're relying on whatever structure is up there to hold it. So where's that unistrut? This is called unistrut, comes in 10-foot lengths. This is 7/8 unistrut. They also make an 1 5/8, which is like that thick. Obviously the 1 5/8 one to hold more. This unistrut will hold a few hundred pounds in this position. It'll obviously hold a few thousand pounds if you're close to the studs. But if you have to span, like sometimes up in the ceilings when we're hanging TVs from the ceiling, we may have to span an 8-foot section of steel. So that means you only have a foot hanging over on each side. So if you're going to hang 40 or 50-inch TV, this is more than enough. If you're going to hang an 80-inch, believe it or not, you'll see this start to flex in the middle a little bit, but over time it will stay that way or drop a little more. So you want to go with the bigger stuff. They make hangers for this when you're hanging them in the ceiling. So say this is your steel beam here, or actually this. Say this is your steel beam. You can either put it here or in the webbing. And basically what this does is this slides on, and you just bring this down, and what will happen is this lip, okay, like this. This lip will catch the steel, and when you tighten that, this little L shape will catch that, and as you tighten it down, it'll lock it to the steel so it can't move. So if you have to go across two beams, you put one of these on each side, and this is not going anywhere. You could hang my truck from it, you know. So this is what you want to use. If there's no way for you to use this type of anchor, then we've got to come up with a different concept. You can either drill the steel and use a nut and bolt, or sometimes we just end up not using this and just using eye bolts or whatever. You just want to make sure that whatever you're securing to is strong enough to hold whatever it is that you're hanging. One of the ways we do that also is, if you're using that this is called a window clamp, by the way. So if you're using this window clamp to secure this to the steel, they also make spring nuts. These are designed for this stuff. Now the 7/8 stuff, the spring won't fit behind there. You can just peel these right off, and you can slide it in there. It has teeth in here, so that when you slide it in and you tighten down, those teeth lock into it. It won't move anywhere. The biggest key to mounting anything is to use the right hardware. Some guys just put a nut on it, maybe a washer or whatever. But the best way to keep anything, because don't forget you have air handling units in the building, elevators, Mother Nature, everything. Even in a full structure like that, there is still vibration and constant vibration. So if you're gonna, you have this across the steel, you need to hang something from this. Eye bolts. You can take a lock washer. Everyone know what a lock washer is? Can you see it? It's got like a little split in there. Lock washer, washer. This is already a nut, so it's got threads on it. You can put that right in there, tighten it down, and then you have your hanging point. 3/8 rod, hangers, all this anything that's 3/8 can hold anywhere from 380 to up to like 1,200 pounds, depending on what it is. Eye bolts obviously hold less because it's not a solid structure. So if you're going to hang something that's 1,000 pounds, this can separate. It's rare, but it can happen if you're only using one. Now, if you're going to hang something from 3 points or 4 points, then you're cutting down the strength. You're cutting down the weight that this one has to hold. So if it's something really heavy, put more than one hanging point, and then you'll cut the weight that this one is holding in half, or however many you put on there. The reason for the lock washers is it keeps that vibration from making the nut spin. The tension on this is like you can't squeeze that closed. Maybe with pliers, but you definitely can't do it with your hand. That little bit of tension is what keeps the nut from spinning back off. If you're still not sure, they do make stuff called Loctite. It's a little liquid that you can put on the threads, and it's like glue for steel. It won't let the nut come back off. But as long as you put a lock washer on there, you'll be fine. They also make what they call square washers. This is what I prefer to use when using the Unistrut, because these washers are kind of flimsy. This is good if you're going on this side with the washer, it's good because it's got a flat surface to grab onto. If you're putting it on this side, it doesn't make up that gap, and this will actually fold into the Unistrut, and then at some point it'll just drop down, and now you have a loose connection. They make what are called square washers. They're thick steel. They're meant for Unistrut. It grabs both sides of it, and it has enough surface space, but it's 1/4 of an inch thick. You can't bend it, so it'll never come loose. I've hung stuff 25 years ago, and it's still hanging because I haven't seen any stories in the news that somebody died. So I'm guessing they're still hanging.
You can on the news?
I do. I watch it every night just to see if something fell. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're using all the proper hardware and stuff.